Hey everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to another episode of #EpicBookRecs. So this is a series that I do here on the Epic Reads channel where I recommend a bunch of books based on a certain theme. So we've done a bunch of fun and exciting themes before, so definitely go check out the playlist in the description if you want to watch more of them and get some more bookish recommendations. But for today's video, I wanted to do a theme that I've been dying to do because I'm a very emotional person and I feel like I cry super easily at books, at movies, at TV shows. So today I wanted to tell you about some cry-worthy books. Some books that will get you in the feels and, have you bawling by the end or just, feeling so hard for the characters. I think it's always really nice to just have a good cry while reading a book. So I highly recommend all of these. And I'll also mention that I have read all of these books and they're all some of my all-time favorites, which just speaks to how powerful they are. So let's just jump right in. Alright, so the first book is a really recent favorite of mine, and that is An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahereh Mafi. If you guys have been following me from my channel, you may know that Tahereh Mafi is one of my favorite writers. I loved her previous contemporary, A Very Large Expanse of Sea, and this is her newest contemporary, An Emotion of Great Delight. And this is such a fantastic book. It is set in 2003 and it follows a Muslim American main character named Shadi. And Shadi wears hijab, and this is several months after America has declared war on Iraq, and there's just a lot of tensions in the community and the political landscape, and she's feeling a lot of that as a Muslim girl. But Shadi also has a lot of her own personal traumas going on, and this book is sort of told in two different timelines. Things that happened in the previous year and then things that happened in the current year in 2003. And we're seeing how Shadi's life has sort of crumbled to pieces before her eyes, and she is sort of dealing with that. And Shadi herself is a very emotional character. She's been through a lot, and I feel like I really connected to her as a person, and so just reading the entire book was just so emotional and just captivating. The writing is just super, super beautiful, and by the end of it I was just so overwhelmed by this story. I think it's really beautifully and poetically told as well, but there's also just a lot of sadness in this story. And overall this is also sort of a lonely book. Shadi is very lonely for most of it, and I think that that was really interesting to read about as well. So overall I really, really loved it and I highly recommend. And it was one of those books that just pulled me in and made me want to just continue reading it because I just was so invested in Shadi's life. Alright, the next book is a very well-known favorite, and that is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. So you can probably tell by the title of this book that this one's gonna be a sad one. And for the most part, it's actually quite fun and happy. There's this really sweet sort of friendship and romance between these two boys, and it's this really beautiful concept of finding a friend and a loved one even in your last moments. And so in this book and in this sort of version of our world, there's something called the Death Cast, which is the service that calls you the day you're going to die and lets you know you're going to die. And so our two main characters, Rufus and Mateo, both get the call from the Death Cast and are informed that they're going to die. And so the two of them in their own respective situations end up on this app called the Last Friend app, where you can find a last friend to spend your day with, and they find each other. And it's this really beautiful story set over a single day where they get to know each other and become friends and, fall for each other. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful story. And you may think the title's lying to you, but it is not. They both die at the end. I think what I love about cry-worthy books is that, they just hit you with so much emotion and you feel so strongly for the characters, and I definitely think this is one of those books. I was just so invested in Rufus and Mateo's lives and, seeing what they were losing, but also seeing all the potential that they had for the future that they thought they were not going to have. And so seeing Mateo sort of break out of his shell and Rufus find someone who really cares for him through Mateo, that was just all really, really beautiful. And so yeah, highly recommend if you're looking for a LGBTQ romance, if you're looking for a quick read that is set over a single day, if you're looking for something that's slightly a bit of a sci-fi in a very contemporary sense, this is definitely the book to pick up. Alright, the next book is one that I absolutely love, and that is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. Tiffany D. Jackson is one of my favorite thriller mystery writers. She's just so fantastic, and she writes them in this very incredible way, contemporary lens. So this follows her main character, Enchanted Jones, who is this young girl in high school who has, a talent for singing and ends up in this sort of competition that puts her in front of this really big star named Corey Fields. And he is the type of person who is a lot older than her, but he has taken a sort of interest in her. And Enchanted finds herself sort of drawn into the idea of him and the way that he seems to give her all the answers. But the story is also told in another timeline where Enchanted is standing over Corey's body and you're trying to figure out what happened to him and how he died. And so there's also that aspect to the story, and in the way that you see Enchanted's life sort of crumble before her eyes, but also how there's a little bit of this mystery, you know, that's happening afterwards and that you're trying to figure out. And this is a very sort of difficult book. It has some really tough conversations and, you know, shines a light on rape culture, on this loss of innocence, and on misogynoir. And it's really, really well done, and it was just such a powerful book that I found myself just like crying by the end of it because I felt so strongly for Enchanted. So it's definitely one of those ones where you care so much for the characters and you want the best for them, but also seeing how the world around them isn't really being kind to them. All right, the next book that I want to talk about is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. So Elizabeth Acevedo is one of my favorite writers. She is just so fantastic. She writes a mix of prose and poetry. This book is told entirely in verse and from two different perspectives. So one is Yahaira, who lives in New York, and the other is Camino, who lives in the Dominican Republic. And the really interesting thing about this book is that these two girls are actually half siblings. They share the same father, but up until this point, one or both, I can't remember, doesn't know that they have another sibling. And so the story sort of starts when their father dies in a plane crash, and the two of them are forced to face the fact that they have another sibling across the water. And this book was just so powerful in the sense that because it is written in verse, you're really getting the raw emotions of both of these characters and the way that they're individually dealing with their grief and, you know, the way that they have lost their father, but also the sense of betrayal and loss as they find out about this other sister that they didn't know they had. But it's also this really beautiful story of these two sisters sort of coming together and healing together. And I think that that was so beautiful. And so by the end of it, I found myself crying once again. And so for that reason, I think it's just such a cry-worthy book. Like, it just hits you in all of the feels and you feel so hard for the characters and you just want them to like hug it out and, you know, be happy together and, you know, be there for each other. And it was just such a fantastic book for that reason. All right, the next book that I want to talk about is Parachutes by Kelly Yang. This is one of my all-time favorite books, and it definitely has some like lighter moments, but it also has a lot of heavy moments, which is why I think it's a bit of a cry-worthy book, because there are so many powerful moments in the book and, you know, moments of just strong emotional growth and really tough conversations among the characters that you just like feel so hard for them. And it just has you like welling up a bunch of emotions. And so this one also has some triggers for sexual assault, so I'd be careful of that along with Grown. But this basically follows our two different main characters, Claire and Danny. So Claire is from China and she's one of these kids called a parachute. So they're basically these wealthy Asian children who are dropped like parachutes by their wealthy Asian parents in America to study there. And so Claire is one of these kids. She's sort of dropped by her parents in the States to study there, and she is sent to live with her host family, which is Danny's family. And so Danny has never really come from money. She and her mother clean houses on the side to pay for all of their bills. And Danny is sort of a really highly achieving student and really wants to do well. And so it's these two characters sort of juxtaposed against each other and seeing how their lives are very different and how they're sort of forced to deal with this crazy Gossip Girl-esque at times world. And they both sort of go to this like really private academy with all of these wealthy students. And so they're thrust into this very hostile sort of environment where they lose a lot of their innocence, I feel like, and they're forced to grow up in ways that they shouldn't have to. And so yeah, it was just a really powerful book, and I was just so invested in both Claire and Danny's lives, and I just wanted the best for them because they were just so endearing characters with some really real flaws that, you know, reminded me of people in real life. All right, this next book is one of my all-time favorites as well, and that is Challenger Deep by Neal Shusterman. I absolutely love Neal Shusterman as a writer. He is just such an interesting and incredible writer and has so many varied ideas, but this book is very personal in nature because it is slightly based off of his son's life and experiences, and his son also contributed some parts to the book and some illustrations that are actually in the book. But basically this follows our main character, Caden Bosch, who has a mental illness that is adjacent to schizophrenia. It is never really exactly named in the book, and the book is sort of told in two different perspectives or timelines, wherein one, Caden is going through these very vivid delusions where he thinks he's on a pirate ship and, you know, dealing with a captain and a parrot and all of this. And then another one where he is this brilliant high school student who starts to get absorbed in his own thoughts and ends up in therapy. And you start to see how the characters in his delusions sort of parallel the people in his real life. And it's just this really interesting story, and I absolutely loved it. I think it was just such a powerful book, and the way that you get to see the illustrations from Neil Shusterman's son in this book is also just really incredible. And I think throughout I was just so captivated by Caden's story and wanted the best for him. And I think it's just one of those books that just like has you feeling so hard for a person's situation. And for that reason, I think it was just a very cry-worthy book. I definitely, let out a bunch of tears by the end of it because I think even the ending is just so powerful. All right, this last one is one of my all-time favorites as well, and that is Frankly in Love by David Yoon. So the reason I love this book is because, one, I really related to it really hard, but also it's just a really both fun story, but also has some like really meaningful moments and some really deep connections between the characters. This book follows our main character, Frank, who is Korean American, and he has always sort of struggled between his identity as both Korean and American. And there's a really strong aspect of him sort of trying to live up to his parents' expectations, specifically what his father thinks of him and wants for him. And so you're seeing the way that that sort of shapes his life, but also the way that he really cares for his family and wants to do the best for them. And so this book actually involves a fake dating situation where Frank's parents, they really want him to date a Korean girl, but Frank has this girl at school who's white, who he really wants to date. So Frank hatches this plot with his family friend named Joy, who is also Korean, who also happens to be dating like someone who is not Korean. And so they hatch this plot to fake date each other so that they can get away with their own respective relationships and still go out and not have to lie as much. But obviously that whole situation crumbles apart when they start to fall for each other. And so on the surface, this is a really sort of fun and joyful book and a bit of a rom-com, but it does have some really, deep and heartfelt moments between Frank and his family and just the way that he's dealing with his identity. And I think by the end I was just so invested in Frank's life and I wanted him to be happy and to feel comfortable with himself and just to be with the person that he loved. And so yeah, in that way it was just like a really powerful book, and I think not everyone will cry for this one, but it is definitely like a emotional book towards the end. All right, but those are all the cry-worthy books that I wanted to talk about today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, leave me a comment down below with your favorite cry-worthy book or another recommendation that I just didn't mention. And if there's ever a theme that you want me to cover and do recommendations for, definitely leave them down below, and I will do my best to do a video on that subject. And once again, definitely go check out the playlist in the description if you want to watch more of these videos and get more recommendations. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next episode of #EpicBookRecs. Bye!